Why do we say Beto? Muy buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por venir y estar con nosotros. Let's hear it from Mihaela and Sheena and these extraordinary candidates that we have here right now. Who makes us so proud. And listen, it's because of the fire that you just saw and that you just heard, and all of the work that all of us together did right here in Collin County, that we reached what had been the high water mark for Democratic performance in this county. 47% of the vote on election night in 2018. And let me just tell you what that translated to, not just in Collin County, but across the state. You made me the first Democrat to win the 4 major metro areas and their surrounding counties since Lyndon Baines Johnson did it in 1964. The highest voter turnout since 1970 in a midterm election. Young voter turnout up 504%. 12 new Democrats elected to the state legislature. 2 new members of Congress flipping control of the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. 17 black women elected to judicial positions in Harris County. And we are just getting started. That is the base upon which we are building right now. So I am here to tell you that not only are we going to win Collin County with 51% of the vote on election night, together we are going to win the state of Texas on November 8th, 2022. And here's how I know that we're going to win. Because we're fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, her own health care, right here in the state of Texas. We're going to prioritize the lives of our children over the interests of the NRA or any special interest in Texas. We're going to have the backs of our public school educators, classroom teachers, counselors, librarians. Let's hear it for the librarians. The heroes of 2022.
Right?
But they're standing up for us and this democracy and freedom and the ability to be educated and to learn the stories and histories of every single one of us. And let me tell you about these classroom educators and the support personnel, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, the janitors, those who make sure that we can make public education possible for our kids and our grandkids and the young people who will succeed us as the leaders of the future. On average in Texas, the educator is underpaid by about $7,500 a year against the national average. On average, she or he is working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And despite being so damn underpaid, those Halloween decorations up in the classroom, they paid for out of their own pocket. That kid who shows up without his notebook or pens or papers or any supplies out of her own pocket, she is more likely than not to purchase them. That child on free and reduced breakfast and lunch, but who shows up the next day hungry because there's no meal waiting for them at dinner time, out of her own pocket again, she pays to make sure there are calories in the stomach to burn, to do that homework that she is assigned. I want to make sure that we're treating that educator with the dignity and respect that they deserve, that we owe them, and that they have earned. And that means paying them enough just to work one job. That means allowing them to focus on those children in front of them by canceling the STAR test. That means for every retired educator among us, we have a cost of living adjustment every single year going forward, so you don't have to work well into your retirement. And it just means that we show you the respect that guarantees that the next generation will want to enter the profession. We're seeing the largest exodus of education talent in the history of the state of Texas. My 11-year-old, Henry, finished the 5th grade without a permanent classroom teacher a single day of that academic year. And when I tell that story in Plano or Dallas or Fort Worth or Arlington, I get heads nodding and people saying, you know what? That was my child in the 6th grade or the 7th grade or the 10th grade. And look, we all love and are grateful for the substitute teachers who fill in that gap, right?
Yes.
But that permanent classroom teacher, that consistent presence in front of those kids, that teacher is the one who notices if something's not right, if that child is losing weight in a weird way, or if they're just troubled or depressed or sad or thinking about doing something harmful to themselves, the level of suicidal ideation. And I know we don't like to talk about this or think about this. I don't either, as a parent of 3 kids. But if we fail to confront it or acknowledge it, we will never make it better. That classroom teacher is literally keeping that child alive.
Yep.
And I want to make sure we keep her in the classroom so that she can do that job. So, public school educators, please know this. We have got your back, and when we win this, we're going to show it through the actions that we take with these amazing state legislators that we're going to be working with. For the women and men among us who have served this country in uniform, I want you to hear me out. Not only are we all grateful to you for your service, and everyone says that, and everyone should say that, but we're going to start showing that in the actions that we take, in the resources that we deploy, and the way that we are there for you when you come back to this country, the way we are there for you to send you off, to ask you to literally lose your life or take the lives of others in the name of this country. Just think about this. The Vietnam-era veteran went off and fought a war that this country never fully understood or supported in the first place, and returned not to ticker-tape parades or thank you for your service, at best indifference, at worst downright hatred. And nonetheless, that veteran put his head down, got after it, raised his family, went to work, started a business, ran for office, did whatever he needed to do to continue to contribute to the success of this country. But I'll tell you what we did to him. It took us 40 years, 4 decades, to treat his exposure to Agent Orange as a presumptive condition for the cancers that consume far too many who serve this country. 40 years before we spent a dime trying to save the lives who served for us and were willing to lose those lives in combat. This is what I hear from that generation. They say that there are men and women returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria and Somalia, Yemen, and all the other countries that we send the best of us off to fight those wars, who have breathed in things from toxic burn pits that make it harder for them to breathe when they're back here in Plano right now. And they don't want this generation to be treated the same way that that generation was. So I promise you this. We're going to honor the service of those veterans by standing up a toxic burn pit registry in the state of Texas. Connect every returning veteran with that care that they need. For the hundreds of veterans experiencing homelessness right now in the 9th largest economy on the planet, we will spare no expense. We will bear whatever burden necessary to make sure that you have a roof over your head and a connection to the care that will save your life. And speaking of care, you have told me that when you're lucky enough to get into the VA, all too often, they may prescribe to you an opioid to which you fear you may become addicted, and from that addiction, you think that you may die. And it's a reasonable conclusion to come to because tens of thousands of our fellow Americans have done just that. But you also tell me that the PTSD, or traumatic brain injury, or military sexual trauma that you incurred in service to this country can be treated by something else. It relieves your symptoms. It increases your appetite. It restores your ability to sleep. But to use that in Texas today makes you a criminal in the eyes of the law. That's why we are legalizing marijuana when we win this election. And because we know that disproportionately black and brown Texans have served time for possession of this substance, even though all Texans use this substance in equal numbers, we are going to expunge the arrest records of those who serve time for possession of marijuana in the state of Texas. And then this is the issue that makes every other one of these things that we want to do possible. And that is this great democracy that every single one of those veterans swore an oath to. They didn't promise to serve and protect the president or a political party or people in positions of power, but literally the Constitution, the exception to the rule in human history and on the planet today, that we will freely and fairly choose those who serve us in these positions of public trust. And yet here in Texas, hear me out on this, the governor and our current government have made it so hard to vote that 13% of the mail-in ballots cast this past March of year 2022 of our Lord, 13% were rejected and sent back. 13 out of 100 times when someone in the midst of the pandemic was just trying to vote. And I don't care if they're a Republican or a Democrat, no me importa, right?
Yeah.
Just as long as they can choose. And you know what? There was a 95-year-old World War II veteran among them. This guy, willing to lose his life to fight fascism, half a world away, to defend democracy here at home in 1944, tried unsuccessfully 3 times to have his ballot by mail counted. It was rejected every single time. Now, no one among us has more earned the right to vote than that veteran at 95 years old, but he cannot do that in this state. So, when we win, we make sure that every eligible citizen in this state can freely and fairly cast that ballot. We make sure it's easier to get on the rolls with online voter registration, automatic voter registration. You're a citizen, you're ready to go. We replace the system by which members of Congress choose their voters instead of the other way around, the gerrymander we have today with citizen-led redistricting commissions. And then this idea that I want to try on for size right here, we replace Confederate Heroes Day as a celebrated state holiday with Election Day as a celebrated state holiday. So you can take the day off of work. We're going to do this. We are going to do this. And I'll tell you, we're going to do this for all the reasons that I just raised and so many more, but tell me there's a more powerful reason than this. We're running against the worst governor in the United States of America today, Greg Abbott. Find me someone who has failed harder than this guy over the last 8 years. I'll give you some examples. 1 month ago, the most extreme abortion ban in America went into effect right here in the state of Texas. And look, not only does it begin at conception, not only is there no exception for rape, or incest, or effectively and functionally the life of the mother or the woman at stake, but it is happening in what is right now the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas. We know for sure this will consign far too many women and girls to unnecessary suffering and death because of his callousness and his cruelty. But we also know that we have the power to overcome this, and not just aspirationally because we say that we can, but because we have before against much longer odds. And I explain with this. 50 years ago, abortion was just as illegal in the state of Texas as it is today. But no one came and rode to the rescue of Texas women and girls from outside of this state. In fact, Texas women like Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade were 2 Texas attorneys, Linda Coffey, who still lives in Dallas, Sarah Weddington from Bright Blue, Abilene, Texas. Those 3 young Texas women prevailed upon an all-male United States Supreme Court to win the protection for the right to privacy. In other words, to make very personal, very often painful decisions without fear of government intrusion or intervention. So look, here's my logic. If Texas women won the way 50 years ago, Texas women are going to win it back in 2022. We're going to get it done. 21 weeks ago tomorrow, 19 kids and their 2 teachers were taken from us in a classroom in Uvalde, Texas. Absolutely defenseless against a guy who at the age of 18 could buy not 1 but 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition for a weapon that was originally designed to be used and carried by U.S. soldiers in Vietnam. To take an enemy soldier down at 500 yards, penetrate a steel helmet, and knock him down dead. Those kids were not at 500 yards, they were at 5 feet max. Nothing on their head but maybe a baseball cap. Their parents, and I've met them, only able to identify the bodies by the shoes that they were wearing or the DNA swab that they had to take to identify the body at the end of that day, May 24th, 2022. But we got to know this. Those kids were also defenseless against Greg Abbott, who after 5 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history, which have taken place in this state just over the last 5 years, the only thing he's done is make it easier for people who should not have firearms to carry them openly on our streets. He did away with the license to carry program and signed something into law known as permitless carry. And now the 38,000 people who over the last 6 years were rejected for a license to carry because by law enforcement they were deemed just too dangerous to themselves, too dangerous to a loved one, too dangerous to these kids in these classrooms in our schools across Texas. Now all 38,000 of them, because Greg Abbott turned his back on law enforcement, are free to carry openly, and none of us are the wiser or the safer for that. So here's what we do. If we're going to follow the lead of these extraordinary parents in Uvalde who would be forgiven if they never wanted to show their face again in public, but they're not about that. They took a 5-hour bus ride to be in Edinburgh, Texas, the day of the only debate that Greg Abbott would allow, knowing full well they would not be allowed into a 1,000-person theater that he didn't allow a single soul into, to make sure that none of us lose sight what happened to their kids and what all of us together can do to make sure that it never happens to another child in Texas. Raising the age of purchase to 21 for an AR-15. A red flag law for those who already have guns in the home and are threatening to use them against others in our lives. A universal background check. On this much, there is common ground and agreement in Texas, and we working together are going to make sure that we make the most of it. 18 months ago, the temperature dropped in Texas in February of 2021. But the guy in power could not keep the power going to the people that he purported to serve. Here in the energy capital of the world, the lights went out, the heat stopped running, and the water stopped flowing as well because it was frozen in the pipes above your head, pipes that soon burst as soon as the temperature began to rise again, causing $10 billion in damage to properties all across the state of Texas. 700 people lost their lives in this state that we know of. Vietnam-era veteran, 75 years old, can't charge his oxygen tank in his house, so he wheels it out to his truck where they find him dead of hypothermia. An 11-year-old child in Conroe, Texas, his mom unable to pile enough blankets on his body. He is dead by the next morning. Kids who burned up in their houses because their parents lit fire to their furniture, trying to keep them warm. Those fires got out of control again and again and again. And here's the kicker, and the insult to the injury that we sustained. That grid is still not fixed going into this next winter, and all of us got left holding the bag with higher energy and electricity prices. $45 more on average per month for electricity ratepayers in Texas. You can call that the Abbott tax if you wish, and you can spread that around to anybody who will listen. And I tell you what, this happened because as the power was failing, Greg Abbott ordered the price of electricity pegged at its highest allowable rate for days. And that meant that gas soon started trading at 200 times what it had sold for the day before. Some utilities went into bankruptcy. Others took billions of dollars in debt on. But his buddies and his largest campaign contributors, their companies literally made $11 billion in profit over the course of 5 days last February. Here's what we do. We win this election. We winterize and weatherize every part of the grid. We connect ERCOT to the national grid so we can pull down electricity on the grid, sell it back up to you guys surplus. And for those who stole the $11 billion from us, we're going to take those bastards to court and get every penny back for the ratepayer in the state of Texas. That's what we're going to do. Last number I'm going to leave you with, and that is the number 8. That is the number of years that this guy has served in this highest position of public trust. And look, not only has he served in that office Republicans control every other statewide office in the land. They control the state house and they control the state senate. No wonder on that debate stage, he's blaming Joe Biden and everybody but himself, or where he sits, which is where the buck stops in this state last time I looked. So, does Greg Abbott wake up in the morning wanting the grid to fail, or for kids to be shot in their classroom, or for our property taxes to go up $20 billion since he took office? Probably not, but he's been unwilling or unable to make the changes necessary to show the leadership that we deserve and demand to make it better for all of us. So hear me out. In the final days, because Mahela's right, 7 days left to us before the first big day of early voting, next Monday, the 24th. He is going to be raining negative ads down upon your head, trying to scare you about us, about one another, and most importantly for this election, about our candidate. So let me just tell you this. After 8 years, homicides are on the rise in Texas by 50%. And he can try to blame anyone else, but the reason that is because of that permitless carry bill that he signed into law that has gun violence going through the roof. Gun violence now the leading cause of death for children and teenagers. Gun violence claiming more school children here than in any other state in America today. And the governor who promised, when asked by a reporter at the bill signing ceremony outlawing abortion in Texas with no exception for rape, that reporter says, Mr. Governor, what are you going to do for the victims of rape? He replies, we will eliminate rape in the state of Texas. More rapes have been committed in the state of Texas than in any of the other 49. And the ability to bring a perpetrator to justice has declined by half. And it didn't just happen. There are thousands of untested rape kits at DPS headquarters right now in Austin, Texas. So don't believe him when he talks about life or heartbeats. This is about control over the bodies of women and rapists having more rights than their victims in the state. We can do better. Whatever legitimate question you or a reporter might have for him, he's going to try to distract us, right? We talk about the exodus in the classroom, and he's going to say CRT. Be afraid of the stories and histories of those who've never been told accurately or effectively in this state. Ask him why the grid doesn't work, and he'll point to transgender kids, as though that's the existential threat for this state. Threatening, by the way, to turn their parents in for child abuse, the conclusion of which will be that those kids in that loving home are turned over to Child Protective Services, the worst run foster care agency in the United States of America, bar none. And by the way, when we win, we're turning CPS around and we're elevating those kids that can actually take care of. But the place he's going to point to, more than anyone else, is the border. And the folks he wants us to be most afraid of are the immigrants who are seeking to come to this country. Now let me tell you this. Do we have legitimate challenges at our border? Absolutely. We all are concerned about the amount of fentanyl, for example, that is coming into our communities. We've got to be more vigilant and at that more successful at stopping it. Human traffickers, human smugglers, modern day slavery taking place right here in the state of Texas. For those who are bound to their coyotes or traffickers when they enter this country, absolutely. That is a threat and a challenge, and we need to be more successful. But remember this number, 8. After 8 years, this is where we are with Greg Abbott in charge at the border. You've got stunts like busing migrants to Washington, D.C. or Chicago or New York. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's solving any fundamental problem that we have right now. The 1.5 miles of border wall that he has built so far, that's more of a public art project right now than a security device in the state of Texas. $4 billion of your money, of our tax dollars that have been spent. Encounters at the border are not down as he promised. They are actually up. And then this, and I've got to say this, and please indulge me and bear with me. This is difficult, but we got to talk about it. When you've got a governor who traffics in hateful language of invasion, or echoes the former president who himself would talk about immigrants as animals, or an infestation. You know, an infestation is how I might describe cockroaches in my kitchen. Things that I want to kill, that are going to harm my family. Well, that's not lost on some in this state. The day before the Walmart shooting in El Paso, Greg Abbott issues a mailer to this state. He says about this so-called invasion, Texans, we must defend ourselves. We must take matters into our own hands. That's pretty close to a direct quote from the sitting governor of the state of Texas. There's a young man in Allen, Texas, who has purchased an AK-47 to do something about this invasion that he's heard about. His mom, so disturbed, calls the Allen Police Department and says, I need some help. And because we don't have a red flag law in the books, they say, you know what? I'm so sorry, you're on your own, good luck, goodbye. He drives 650 miles to El Paso, and before he walks into that Walmart, he posts something on social media, a manifesto that he's written, echoing the terms that our current governor and that former president were using. He said that he had come to repel the invasion of Hispanics who were taking over this state. And then he walked into that Walmart and started killing people who looked Mexican or immigrant or different to him. When he was arrested by police afterwards, he said, I came to kill Mexicans. That is the logical conclusion of this failed leadership from Greg Abbott right now. And you know, and I know that we are so much better than that. Instead of these stunts and this hateful rhetoric, why don't we offer this state and the rest of the country some solutions? If you want to come here, you got to follow our laws. And our laws will follow our values, our needs, our economic reality. A Texas-based guest worker program for those who want to work jobs that no one born in this state, for whatever reason, is willing to take. Those who are separated by 20-year wait times from India, from the Philippines, from Mexico, to join family members here in Collin County. What if we lifted those visa caps and brought that wait time down? Give you every reason to follow a safe, legal, orderly path. And then the asylum seeker. And this gets me because John Lewis, who I was fortunate enough to serve with in Congress, had this saying, that at one point or another, our families, all of us in this room, came to this country in a different ship. But today, we find ourselves in the same boat. And he would remind us that some came here 10,000, 15,000 years ago, across a land bridge at the Bering Strait, a reminder that the land that we stand and sit on is indigenous land, originally settled by people who came here thousands of years ago. Others were kidnapped in Africa, brought across the Atlantic in bondage, and forced to literally build the foundational success and strength of America and Texas, though they would never be able to partake in the wealth that they made possible. And still others, like the O'Rourkes in the 19th century, fled to this country because to stay in Ireland meant to die in Ireland. In the midst of a famine that would take 1 million lives, the O'Rourkes also crossed the Atlantic and came to the one place that would take them in. So listen, those coming today from Haiti and Venezuela and Honduras and El Salvador and really the planet over are part of this tradition that has made us the country that we are today. All we're asking is that there be that safe, legal, orderly path, that you don't have to climb into the back of a tractor trailer along with 52 other migrants, where you will be found dead at the end of a hot Texas summer day. Imagine the decision you've got to make to climb into the back of that trailer. It's not easy. Someone's got to assist you to lift you up. And then imagine that you now reach down and grab the hand of your 11-year-old daughter and bring her up with you. You don't do it for kicks. You don't do it to steal someone's job. You don't do it to rape or commit crimes in this country. You do it because you probably have no other choice but to try to come here right now. Let's make sure there's a safe, legal, orderly path to get that done. That's what we can lead on when we win this election. You all ready to win? I'm going to need your help. There are volunteers in high visibility yellow vests throughout this room right now. On their clipboards, they have open slots for block walking. Now listen, you have been very busy with life, raising your kids, taking care of your folks, working your jobs, going to school, just trying to catch a break after 2 years of trauma and pandemic. I get it. But this is the last week. before votes begin to be cast. And all I'm asking is for an hour or two of your time, maybe every single day if you can do it, maybe just an hour or two this week if that's all you can manage. But what you can do right now with what you have, where you are, I guarantee you will make the difference. So before you leave, please sign up with somebody wearing one of these yellow vests. I promise you, it's not the candidate, it's not the political party, it is you, the people of this state, who are going to win this election. And lastly, we want to make sure, as we were just reminded by Sheena and Mihaela, that we vote up and down the ballot. That means justice of the peace, that means county commissioner, that means state representative, that means district judge, that means state senator, that means member of Congress, that means everybody up and down. We need a full team that we can work with. When you, if you, come over to take a picture with us before we leave, promise me that you will post that picture on your favorite social media platform to prove that we existed to the people of the future. We want to know that we stood and fought when it counted for the most, and also to bring your friends, family, and neighbors in. They see you. That's going to be so much more powerful than them seeing me or any of these other candidates. They trust you. They're going to follow you. If you post that and say, I am voting for Beto, or I'm voting for Sheena or Mihaela, or any of these other great candidates, they're going to vote with you as well. Let's go out there and win this thing. Let's go.